Ants are known as some of the most creative animals that literally can do the most insane things to survive. So I wanted to know what would happen if I put 1,000 ants up against some of the most crazy LEGO obstacles and challenges. Will they be able to work together and outsmart LEGO, or will they get defeated by a literal toy? Starting with the ultimate baseline test, we're putting 1,000 ants through what they do best, digging. Now, ants are known for their ability to make intricate tunnels on their own, so to push these ants to their absolute limit while making this dirt enclosure, I layered it with a bunch of tiny Lego studs. And because these studs are the same size as an ant's body, the ants are gonna have to work together to figure out how to navigate through this boulder-filled enclosure if they want any chance at getting the food at the bottom. But as you can imagine, almost immediately after putting the ants inside, they started digging down, and soon enough dug directly into a stud. But instead of giving up, the ants communicated with the rest of the colony that there was something blocking their path. And pretty quickly, more ants came down and decided to help dig around the Lego stud and turn it almost into a support beam for their tunnel. Yo, I'm not gonna lie, this does not look stable at all. I feel like a stud could easily collapse their tunnels. But ants are smarter than they look, because I let my cameras run for literally only an hour, and look how much progress they made. Dude, this actually looks insane. But since ants are nocturnal animals, I wanted to see what would happen if I turned off all my lights and left them alone for a night. And let me tell you, I was not expecting this result at all. Throughout the night, the ants made this entire tunnel system using the Lego studs as support beams. And not even were the tunnels perfectly stable, the ants also made it to the pile of food at the bottom and managed to bring it back up to the surface of the enclosure to share it with the rest of the colony. Alright, I think it's safe to say that the ants definitely passed that first challenge. But the challenges are designed to get way more difficult as the video goes on, so now it's time to test our ants once again. And for this next challenge, I built this giant Lego maze. You would think with having 1,000 ants that this would be pretty easy to solve, as the ants could just split up and find the exit insanely fast. So to level up the difficulty of this maze, I created a machine. You see, ants don't rely on sight to communicate with each other, and instead they rely 100% on smell and scent trails to guide the rest of the colony. So by getting some Technic motors, I designed these fans which blow wind really hard into the maze, which will completely disrupt any communication the ants have with each other, turning the colony completely blind. Hey, but if y'all solve this, I got you with a good treat. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I don't think the ants are even gonna be able to smell the apple at the exit. But let's let the ants in the maze and see what happens. And as soon as I opened the gates to let the ants in, hundreds of ants started flooding into the maze. While most ants stayed exactly at the starting point, a huge group of at least 100 ants started swarming towards the dead end. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what they thought was over there. But meanwhile, smaller groups of ants were getting pretty deep into the maze at this point, and there was even one ant exploring the maze all by itself, getting further through the maze than any other ant. But eventually, that ended up just leading to a dead end. Yeah, I'm sorry, ant. But with a couple minutes passing, I started to notice a really weird pattern. A lot of the ants were still at the start of the maze, just mindlessly wandering around. And at first, I thought it might have been because the ants were uninterested in the maze and just didn't care to explore it. But after a little research, apparently only a small portion of an ant colony are actually a thing called scouts. And because scouts mostly travel independently from an ant colony to go in search of food, with the fans blowing wind throughout the entire maze, the scouts had no way of communicating anything with the ant colony, turning the maze from an 1,000 ant effort to pretty much a solo mission. But with even more time passing, I started noticing two ants getting extremely close to the apples I put at the exit of the maze. Oh my god, they're actually so close. Okay, why are you turning around, bro? Wait, but the ant's actually so close to getting to the apple. Come on, come on, come on, you can do it. Yes, oh my god. Well, without that scout ant, the entire colony would have failed the challenge. So thanks for carrying them. But since the ants barely made it through that obstacle, it's time to make a harder challenge. This time, testing their balance and strength with our third obstacle, the tightrope of death above a pit of fire 3000. The solution for this obstacle is painfully simple. If the ants want to get these Cheetos at the end, literally all they have to do is walk across this rope piece to get there. And before you think the ants could just outsmart me by climbing the walls to get around the tightrope, you would be completely wrong. Because this specific breed of harvester ants literally can't climb. If they fall off the rope, they're just gonna be stuck in the pit of fire. So their only way to get the food really is by crossing this rope. But yeah, I started putting the ants in the obstacle, expecting them to start carefully crossing the rope, and bro, The ants literally just ran off the edge. And as I kept putting more ants in, they literally kept running off the edge into the pit of fire. Yo, I'm not gonna lie. I think these ants are too stupid for this. Wait, one ant's actually on the rope. Oh my god. Bro. Yeah, I started to think this obstacle might have been genuinely impossible for the ants. Because literally look how many ants are in the pit of fire. But eventually, I noticed one ant almost halfway across the rope. Bro, you are halfway there. Just please lock in. Okay, why are you turning around? Just go back that way. And I'm not sure why, but after the ant turned around to head towards the Cheeto, it started climbing upside down, which genuinely couldn't be easier than just walking across. Oh my god, it's right there. Just please don't fumble this. Yes, oh my god, this ant is literally the GOAT. Well, good job, ant. One ant carried the entire colony once again. But now, since we've tested our ants' physical abilities to balance, I want to test a harder physical ability next. So for our fourth challenge, this is the squeeze obstacle course. Since ants are already incredibly small, I designed this obstacle to push ants to their limit by making progressively harder fits to get in, ending with an insanely small one-plate gap. And if they succeed, they'll get this apple slice at the end of the course. But now let's see what happens once we let the ants in. And as soon as I opened the gates, the ants swarmed the course and instantly crushed the first two obstacles. But when approaching the fifth obstacle in the course, one ant finally slowed down and started hesitating and turned around. But after communicating with another ant, it immediately turned back, squeezed through the door, completed the obstacle, and instantly crushed the next technical obstacle. And after a little bit of time, a few more ants caught up, joining the ant at the next obstacle, which is a wall of Technic rods. And at first, the ants tried climbing the obstacle, which they failed at since they can't climb. And after a little thinking, they finally realized that they could just climb under it. And finally, one ant made it to the one plate gap and literally just started pacing around for like a minute. And honestly, I started to think that this might have been too small of a gap, but then I noticed out of nowhere, 3 ants crawled through and made it to the apple, completely crushing this course. Dude, the ants literally completed this in 2 minutes. But we still haven't pushed Lego obstacles to their full limit yet. That's why for this next challenge, I created this insane Technic course with moving obstacles, like this rotating spinning thing, this unstable floor that goes up and down, these spinning rods, and even these rotating squeeze obstacles. But since this is by far the craziest obstacle for the ants, I'm gonna bless them up this time by giving them strawberries at the end. Anyways, before I let the ants in, if you've enjoyed these challenges so far and you want to be an OG subscriber to the channel and claim you were here early, subscribe, I guess. But with that being said, let's let the ants in and see what happens. And immediately, ants swarmed the course, with most of them completing the first obstacle with ease. But with that being the easiest obstacle, most of the ants lined up to the next obstacle completely stumped on what to do. But a few brave ants managed to step up and balance on the unstable floor and eventually get across it, completing the obstacle. Although the next obstacle was super easy for the ants, as they just walked under it completely. Yeah, sometimes I kind of suck at building, I'm not gonna lie. But I didn't realize when building how tiny the ants actually were, because they were able to fit under the last 2 obstacles so easy, and they just made it to the strawberries with no challenge. Well, congratulations, ants. But that was the last obstacle. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe and comment if you have any other video ideas. Peace.